This is Alo Dam, a vast reservoir of water situated in the Alo community of Konduga local government area of Borno State and 20 kilometers south of Maiduguri, the state capital. Commissioned in 1986, the expansive dam sits on the Ngada River, which is one of the tributaries of the Lake Chad. Alo Dam has a total reservoir capacity of 112 cubic meters of water, and it is the primary source of water for domestic consumption for residents of the city of Maiduguri and surrounding areas. To say the least, Alo Dam is a vital public utility facility very dear to the hearts of the people of Maiduguri and residents of all the communities that draw drinking water from the dam, as well as those who graze and water their cattle along its banks or use its water to irrigate their farmlands. The critical and invaluable utility value of Alo Dam, however, plummeted drastically and tragically on Monday, September 9, when the multipurpose dam overtopped. Overtopping is a hydrological term used to describe the incident that occurs when sustained days of persistent and heavy rainfall leads to a dam accumulating water beyond its maximum storage capacity. Consecutive days of persistent rainfalls experienced in the location of Alo Dam in the period preceding September 9 eventually made the excess water that accumulated in it to spill over the top of its reservoir. This resulted in severe flash flooding in surrounding areas and communities, especially the Maiduguri Metropolitan and Jere area councils. The development inflicted severe humanitarian hardships on victims of the flooding. While Maiduguri was worst hit, the flooding also extended to Yobe State and parts of Bauchi State. Though severe flooding incidents had occurred in other parts of the country during the 2024 rainy season, the devastating flooding incident experienced in Maiduguri when Alo Dam overtopped turned out as the worst flooding disaster in Nigeria during that rainy season and the most extensive experience in Maiduguri city in 40 years. The flooding equally tested the preparedness for managing flooding disasters and the flood mitigation initiatives of the tripod of critical stakeholders tasked with tackling such disasters and provide succor to victims. Foremost among this tripod of stakeholders in Nigeria is the federal government, which is traditionally expected to come to the aid of affected states and their people when such disasters occur. Next are those states of the Federation themselves that usually experience rainfall-induced flooding, while the third leg of the flooding disaster response tripod are disaster management agencies.
We will help Borno State.
Let me assure you.
While the federal government provides the needed leadership as well as the robust financial muscle and direction for managing the outbreak of disasters, the state governments drive the response and recovery efforts. However, the various response initiatives are coordinated by the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, the apex body among the agencies statutorily tasked with managing emergency situations in the country, which include flooding disasters. As you will see shortly, just like the federal government did in providing excellent leadership, and the same way the governments of some of the states which experienced flooding in the 2024 rainy season rose remarkably to the daunting challenges triggered by the adverse situation, NEMA also discharged itself creditably in managing the fallout of the severe flooding in Maiduguri. As a matter of fact, the Director General of NEMA, Mrs. Zubeida Umaru, relocated our office temporarily from the Abuja headquarters of the agency to Maiduguri to enable her anchor NEMA's flood response and recovery operations in the city, literally from the front. This firm demonstration of unwavering commitment and exemplary leadership was to the admiration of key stakeholders in the executive and legislative arms of government, both at the federal and state levels. Not only that, The agency equally performed exceptionally well in the coordination of disaster response and recovery activities to the various flooding disasters that trailed the peak of the 2024 rainy season in other parts of the country. 4. At the same time that it was contending with the situation in Maiduguri, Borno State, NEMA was equally discharging its assessment, recovery and support service responsibilities in 31 other flood-affected states too.
To get a pat on the back is extremely encouraging, but it's not about me being the DG NEMA. The credit, I think, goes out mostly to our people that are out there on the fields. We were really delighted to get those commendations, and I pray that we're still able to do much more in terms of response once disaster strikes.
In the particular case of the massive flooding in Maiduguri, which, as you heard earlier, was the worst that was experienced in the country in the 2024 rainy season, President Tinubu aborted his scheduled trip overseas and instead visited Maiduguri, where he condoled with the government and people of Borno State.
Let me assure you that we are going to be with you with Borno State.
Earlier, the president had directed his vice, Senator Kashim Shettima, to proceed to the affected areas for a prompt on-the-spot assessment of the disaster, which occurred while he was on a state visit to China. President Tinubu's clear mandate included that the vice president condole with the people and government of Borno State on behalf of the federal government and reaffirm its commitment to supporting victims and communities, while also ensuring that recovery efforts, including the distribution of relief items, reached and impacted all areas affected by the disaster. It is noteworthy, though, that the interventions by NEMA through prompt disaster assessments conducted by its emergency response teams in flood-affected areas and the extraordinary diligence with which the agency has been coordinating the receipts, storage, and subsequent distribution of relief items donated by international and domestic organizations, as well as foreign governments and humanitarian support groups to intended beneficiaries through designated channels, paved the way for the success of the mediations by both the federal government and the states affected by flooding, as well as similar disasters. Indeed, NEMA's response helped mitigate the impact of not only the Maiduguri flooding, but also other flooding disasters that trailed the 2024 rainy season in an impressive manner. This, no doubt, is a testament to the efficacy of the robust mechanisms put in place by the management of NEMA under the leadership of his Director General, Mrs. Zubeida Umaru, to strengthen the agency's flood preparedness and mitigation protocols. The initiatives include building community resilience to flooding by encouraging public-spirited individuals and organizations from within and outside affected communities to support both response and recovery efforts, and also reinvigorating the existing robust flood preparedness measures that the management had inherited from preceding leaderships of the agency. While it is true that severe rainfall-induced floods and their attendant disasters have been recorded across the country in the 2024 rainy season, it is noteworthy, nonetheless, that the trend has been managed commendably by NEMA. That's not all. The scope and impact of rainfall-induced flooding in the 2024 rainy season have been equally well contained by the agency, for they could have been far worse had NEMA not risen to the occasion so resolutely. Above all, flooding in 2024 was a global phenomenon and not peculiar to Nigeria. This video documentary highlights how NEMA prepared actively for averting and mitigating against the impact of the flooding disasters that had been predicted for Nigeria prior to the outbreak of the 2024 rainy season. This is the story of NEMA's steadfast resolve to not be caught unawares by those flooding disasters. The far-reaching measures it put in place to achieve that firm resolve, as well as the commendable strides it has made in its realization. It is a story of imaginative proactiveness and exemplary vision in the discharge of statutory roles. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, no doubt, had its work on the management of flooding in the year 2024 well cut out for it, following the release of the Seasonal Climate Predictions (SCP) for the year by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency (NIMET) in February 2024 and the unveiling of the Annual Flood Outlook (AFO) by the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency (NISA) 2 months after, in April 2024. The predictions and outlook issued by NIMET and NISA were quite grim. Both stated quite clearly that Nigeria will contend with monumental rainfall-driven flooding in the rainy season of 2024. A total of 148 local government areas in 31 states of the Federation were categorized by the reports as falling within high flood risk areas, while 249 were declared to be within moderate flood risk areas range in the Federation. But even before NIMET and NISA issued their worrisome predictions on flooding for the 2024 rainy season, NEMA had always been mindful that widespread flooding and its associated adverse impacts have and remain constant features of the rainy season in Nigeria. Expectedly, the agency was not caught napping in handling the projected adverse impact of the 2024 rainy season, as it has discharged itself creditably in managing flooding disasters across the nation since the outbreak of the season. In line with its disaster preparedness and risk reduction strategies, NEMA promptly set out to avert and mitigate against flooding disasters predicted for the 2024 rainy season. After a thorough appraisal of the import of the predictions for every facet of national life and a collation of their disaster management implications, which NEMA got a team of experts to undertake, the agency entered into correspondence with the governors of the 36 states of the Federation and the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory (FCT) on the subject. First, and perhaps most importantly, NEMA provided the state chief executives with a list of local government areas in their respective domains that were at the risk to flooding, either on a high or moderate level during the 2024 rainy season. Also, in the correspondence, the agency proffered actions to be taken by the at-risk states to avert or mitigate against flooding disasters in the identified locations. This proactive step significantly impacted positively on the capability of the management of NEMA to avert and mitigate against the impact of flooding across Nigeria in the 2024 rainy season. This was because quite a good number of states followed the NEMA advisory and acknowledged to the agency that doing so helped them manage flooding incidents more effectively during the season. Mrs. Zubeida Umaru is the Director General of NEMA. Mrs. Umaru confirms that NEMA's collaboration with state governments helped minimize the impact of the flooding disasters experienced in the 2024 rainy season.
They really worked, they supported us.
Dr. Bandele Onimude is the Director, Planning, Research and Forecasting Department of NEMA. Dr. Onimude implores Nigerians to heed the forecast-driven advisories of their state governments and disaster management agencies so they can help avert and mitigate against the adverse impact of flooding in the country.
Nigerians should develop a culture of listening to emergency messages. And when they listen to it, they should follow it up. We'll continue to preach the gospel of please listen to news, take it seriously.
Globally, military, paramilitary and security agencies are known to play critical roles in supporting disaster management activities whenever very dire emergency situations arise in their countries. This is because these strategic institutions usually have disaster response units that are well trained and equipped to manage emergencies, including flooding disasters. Whenever emergency situations therefore become overwhelming, these institutions render help to complement the response efforts of disaster management agencies to bring such developments under control. This imperative was not lost on the Director General of NEMA, Mrs. Zubeida Umaru. She therefore leveraged on and activated the institutional clout of the agency to seek and secure solid support from these strategic institutions to heighten collective preparedness against flooding in the rainy season. Accordingly, Mrs. Umaru met with the Chief of Defense Staff, General Chris Musa, who superintends the three services of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, namely the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The NEMA DG also met with the Inspector General of Police, Dr. Kayode Egbetokun, and the Commandant General of the National Security and Civil Defense Corps, Dr. Ahmed Oudi. During these interactions, Mrs. Umaru told the military, paramilitary, and security chieftains that the engagements were part of NEMA's broader consultations with key stakeholders and partners to enhance its service delivery and canvassed for support for the agency.
We received tremendous support from these DRUs in terms of search and rescue. Also, most importantly, in terms of safety and security, where you have camps, they were there to provide security. Maiduguri is unprecedented, so all hands had to be on deck. They brought their trucks, they were there even with their boats, and they assisted in every way. We worked together with them. And also, crowd control in terms of relief distribution when it came to the materials, both food and non-food items. They were on ground to protect both the affected and we that were there to provide services.
This is the National Emergency Operations Center, situated in the Geospatial Center at the Abuja headquarters of NEMA. The National Emergency Operations Center was activated in July 2024, 3 months after its current DG assumed office. It was tasked with strengthening NEMA's capabilities in managing flooding by generating, collating, and analyzing statistical data for conducting flood monitoring. It is also mandated to coordinate resource deployment for tackling flooding, as well as supporting and coordinating responses to incidents of flooding. Other roles performed by the National Emergency Operations Center that have bolstered NEMA's preparedness to manage flooding include the sharing of information on flooding and provision of timely support to areas affected by flooding in the country. NEMA has been able to utilize the outstanding and varied skill set of the highly experienced personnel at the Emergency Operations Center and the center's state-of-the-art equipment to proactively manage the challenges triggered by incidents of flooding in the 2024 rainy season with resounding success.
It has really become, a repository of credible information as it relates to disasters across the country. So what happens is we get situation reports on a daily basis as it unfolds. And we do this in conjunction with states and also other agencies like the UN OCHA, for example. We triangulate. Now, this not only helps us in terms of search and rescue for us to know what we're able to do, we're able to assess from beginning till end what needs to be done, how interventions need to happen as well.
To further keep a firm check on the scale and impact of flooding in the 2024 rainy season, the sitting management of NEMA forged stronger relationships with stakeholders in disaster management to ensure that disaster preparedness, response and recovery operations are well coordinated. And one veritable channel it has used to achieve this goal most vigorously is the National Emergency Coordination Forum, ECF. The National Emergency Coordination Forum encourages members to take more proactive and prompt measures in managing and responding to incidents of flooding disasters with a view to saving more lives when such unfortunate incidents happen. Since the current DG of NEMA assumed office in March 2024, the body has met 4 times, with the gap between the meetings now relatively much shorter. This has helped NEMA in coordinating and tackling the challenges of managing the flooding disasters that were instigated by the 2024 rainy season in a more compelling manner.
In fact, as I speak to you, we're having one right now. And the purpose is to be on the same page so that we're not running all over the place and everybody knows what they're meant to provide. So we had the meeting so that we would know how to tackle these things when they come up.
The management of NEMA laid yet another foundation that has proved to be equally impactful to its handling of the flooding challenges of the 2024 rainy season by embarking on a series of very aggressive and sustained public sensitization campaigns. The initiative was adopted to enlighten and seek the cooperation of the general public, especially at community and local government levels, for the success of the agency's various flood management and control programs in the season. To drive its message home more forcefully, the campaigns alert the public of the flood predictions made by NEMA and NISA and speak to the necessary actions to be taken to avert negative impacts, as well as how to prepare for the predicted disasters arising from flooding incidents that cannot be averted.
That campaign has really helped the agency.
One captivating and engaging feature of NEMA's sensitization campaign are workshops organized to enlighten the public on the nexus between improper waste disposal and flooding. The waste management workshops, which have been held in quite a number of states of the Federation, have been a huge success. This is because they have increased public awareness on the nexus between flooding and improper disposal of waste and helped curtail flooding in states like Lagos during the 2024 rainy season.
When you look around, you will see that there's a lot of trash dumping all over the states. People don't have designated areas where they're meant to do that. And you find that a lot of people throw trash into waterways, and that is what causes some of these floods. We engaged the states, and I think we succeeded because a lot of states were fully involved in it. I would tell you clearly that some states reintroduced their monthly sanitations. Some states like up north were even doing it on a weekly basis.
To further be on top of the task of mitigating against the regrettable impact of flooding in the 2024 rainy season, NEMA has ramped up its ability to conduct rapid assessments of flood disasters, which strengthened it to ameliorate the impact of flooding more steadfastly. These rapid assessments are conducted to determine further actions to be taken towards supporting affected persons and communities in a more emphatic manner. Air Commodore Kennedy Mataluo is the director of the Search and Rescue Department of NEMA. The department is traditionally headed by a serving officer of the Nigeria Air Force.
NEMA usually, once they procure rescue equipment, they don't usually centralize everything in the headquarters here. Boats, rapid response vehicles, and dinghies all are actually issued to zonal offices to keep custody of them, because most of the lead agencies may not have some of this equipment, and NEMA has to bring out their own so that they can utilize it. Also, I think of recent, just before the outset of the rain, we distributed life jackets that we had in the store to all the zonal offices.
We are here to flag off the distribution of relief food items donated by our partners.
Much as it would not have wanted Nigeria to record incidents of flooding disasters, NEMA knows that that could only be wishful thinking. At the same time, it is aware that when they occur, flooding disasters often visit untold hardships on victims. Accordingly, the agency has been providing succor to victims of flooding disasters. NEMA does this by collaborating with various state governments through the Emergency Management Agency of those states and with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and humanitarian agencies from within and without, as well as sympathetic foreign governments to mobilize and distribute essential relief supplies to support affected communities. This strategy helped mitigate the detrimental impact of flooding in Maiduguri, as well as in other parts of the country, in a profound manner. commendable as NEMA's strides have been in managing the flooding disasters and allied catastrophes of the 2024 rainy season, its management is not resting on its oars. But funding remains a huge challenge that the agency is contending with in its resolve to discharge its responsibilities resolutely, not only in managing flooding disasters, but also in other facets of its core mandates.
So it's very obvious that NEMA would require additional funding. Don't forget that we service 36 states, including the FCT. We also have to attend to local government and constituencies. So it's a lot of work. And NEMA will definitely require more funding. Funding is a really, really critical area for NEMA to be able to function effectively.
To tackle the huge challenge which paucity of funds poses to the smooth discharge of its responsibilities, the leadership of NEMA has been reaching out to powerful players in the relevant arms of government to make a case for better funding. And it has been receiving encouraging attention in its overtures to these strategic arms of government. The current management of NEMA, therefore, looks forward to brighter days ahead in living up to its statutory roles, the core of which is managing disasters such as flooding.
So I want to use this medium on behalf of the Senate Committee on Special Duties to appeal to Mr. President to fund NEMA, and I'm proud that the Director General and her team are doing well with the meager resources at their disposal.
Well, I'm also pleading on behalf of the National Emergency Management Agency to the federal government in order to provide additional support for them so that they can carry out their functions diligently.
Do we want NEMA? The answer is yes. How do we want NEMA to move forward and operate? Funding is critical, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try and figure out ways and means to do this.